to the Adventure and Mystery Book Club for a Friday, March 5th. We are continuing our reading of Captain Blood by Rafeal Sabatini. Pirate action as you like it, and I like it. We're racing down on the downhill trail to the end of the book. We still have a few more chapters left, so we're not quite in any kind of hurry yet. But we are in chapter 25, and it turns out that Captain Blood has finally professed his love of Arabella Bishop, only he confessed it to Lord Julian because he feels that Arabella fancies Lord Julian more than he would he, and of course, why on earth would you think otherwise, considering that Julian is a lord and well set up in the hierarchy of English royalty, and lots of money and lots of regard and lots of respect, and so why wouldn't she want Lord Julian instead of him? Arabella Bishop, when she found out about this, hasn't said anything really, other than being very distracted by Captain Blood, who she has now known for several years, and then we've got Arabella's uncle, Colonel Bishop, hunting down Captain Blood. Of course, and Julian is well, Julian got told that he is really more of a friend to Arabella. Arabella does not think of him romantically. But Julian is no fool, and he can see that she is taken with Captain Blood, and that there is certainly some interest on her part for this. And so as a result of this, Lord Julian, who has been somewhat kind of a nice guy up to this point, has sort of flipped sides and has sort of feels now that Captain Blood is his enemy, and that what he should be doing is helping Colonel Bishop capture Captain Blood himself. So there we go. The funny thing is that Lord Julian was at first trying to find Captain Blood for a beneficial reason, and that he was going to give him the commission from King James and have him join the Royal Navy of England and fight Spanish ships in the same way that he's been doing up to this point. But Captain Blood really didn't want to do it. The only reason he did it at all was to save his men, basically, from being captured. And if he takes the commission, then he is exempt from any past misdeeds. And so he signs it, not wanting to really, but reluctantly he does it anyway, just to save himself and his men. And Colonel Bishop never lets him forget it. Colonel Bishop just keeps saying, this is the wrong idea, it's the bad idea, he's a pirate, he's a terrible person, you don't want to be around him, oh my god, I can't believe that you would do this, and it just keeps going on and on and on and on like this, and until finally there is this change of heart. Eventually Captain Blood realizes that they are going to try and capture him and hang him if he lets them, and so he takes Colonel Bishop prisoner, hostage, again, for the second time, takes him all the way out to his ship, and then when the ship gets far enough away from the fort and the fort's cannons, he puts him in a little boat and sends him back to Jamaica. So now it is Colonel Bishop trying to save face by hunting down Captain Blood for revenge, and it is Lord Julian who is now going along with him and along on this ill thought out idea of capturing Captain Blood to get rid of a rival for Arabella Bishop's affections. Meanwhile, we're finding that back in England, the King James is not terribly popular with the people and that there is a movement to overthrow him. Meanwhile, what this means for our heroes, I don't know. Let's find out as we read chapter 25, which is entitled The Service of King Louis. Meanwhile, some 3 months before Colonel Bishop set out to reduce Tortuga, Captain Blood, bearing hell in his soul, had blown into the rock-bound harbor ahead of the winter gales and 2 days ahead of the frigate in which Wolverstone had sailed from Port Royal a day before him. In that snug anchorage he found his fleet awaiting him, the 4 ships which had been separated in the gale off the Lesser Antilles, and some 700 men composing their crews. Because they had been beginning to grow anxious on his behalf, they gave him the greater welcome. Guns were fired in his honor, and the ships made themselves gay with bunting. The town, aroused by all the noise in the harbor, emptied itself upon the jetty, and a vast crowd of men and women of all creeds and nationalities collected there to be present at the coming ashore of the great buccaneer. Ashore he went, probably for no other reason than to obey the general expectation. His mood was taciturn, his face grim and sneering. Let Wolverstone arrive, as presently he would, and all this hero worship would turn to execration. His captains, Hagthorpe, Christian, and Iberville, were on the jetty to receive him, and with them were some hundreds of his buccaneers. He cut short their greetings, and when they plagued him with questions of where he had tarried, he bade them await the coming of Wolverstone, who would satisfy their curiosity to a surfeit. On that he shook them off and shouldered his way through the heterogeneous throng that was composed of bustling traders of several nations, English, French, and Dutch, of planters and of seamen of various degrees, of buccaneers who were legitimate hunters from Hispaniola, and buccaneers who were frankly pirates, of lumbermen and Indians, fruit-selling half-castes, Negro slaves, some dull tear-sheets, and dunghill queens from the old world, and all the other types of human family that converted the quays of Cayona into a disreputable image of Babel. Winning clear at last after the difficulties, Captain Blood took his way alone to the fine house of Monsieur de Ogeron, there to pay his respects to his friends, the governor, and the governor's family. At first, the buccaneers jumped to the conclusion that Wolverstone was following with some rare prize of war. But gradually, from the reduced crew of the Arabella, a very different tale leaked out to stem their satisfaction and convert it into perplexity. Partly out of loyalty to their captain, partly because they perceived that if he was guilty of defection, they were guilty with him, and partly because, being simple, sturdy men of their hands, they were themselves in the main a little confused as to what really had happened. The crew of the Arabella practiced reticence with their brethren in Tortuga during those 2 days before Wolverstone's arrival. But they were not reticent enough to prevent the circulation of certain uneasy rumors and extravagant theories of discreditable adventures. Discreditable, that is, from the buccaneering point of view, of which Captain Blood had been guilty. But that Wolverstone came when he did, it is possible that there would have been an explosion. When, however, the old wolf cast anchor in the bay 2 days later, it was to him all turned for the explanation that they were about to demand of Blood. Now, Wolverstone had only one eye, but he saw a deal more with that one eye than do most men with two, and despite his grizzled head, so picturesquely swathed in green and scarlet turban. He had the sound heart of a boy, and in that heart much love for Peter Blood. The sight of the Arabella at anchor in the bay had at first amazed him as he sailed round the rocky headland that for the fort. He rubbed his single eye clear of any deceiving film and looked again. Still he could not believe what it saw. Then a voice at his elbow, the voice of Dyke, who had elected to sail with him, assured him that he was not singular in his bewilderment. "In the name of heaven, is that the Arabella, or is it the ghost of her?" The old wolf rolled his single eye over Dyke and opened his mouth to speak. When he closed it again without having spoken, closed it tightly. He had a great gift of caution, especially in matters that he did not understand. That this was the Arabella he could no longer doubt. That being so, he must think before he spoke. What the devil should the Arabella be doing here when he had left her in Jamaica? And was Captain Blood aboard and in command, or had the remainder of her hands made off with her, leaving the captain in Port Royal? Dyke repeated his question. This time Wolverstone answered him. "You've two eyes to see with, and you ask me who's only got one, what it is you see." "But I see the Arabella." "Of course, since there she rides. What else was you expecting?" "Expecting?" Dyke stared at him, open-mouthed. "Was you expecting to find the Arabella here?" Wolverstone looked him over in contempt, and then laughed and spoke loud enough to be heard by all around him. "Of course, what else?" And he laughed again, a laugh that seemed to Dyke to be calling him a fool. On that, Wolverstone turned to give his attention to the operation of anchoring. Anon, when ashore he was beset by questioning buccaneers. It was from their very questions that he gathered exactly how matters stood, and perceived that either from lack of courage or other motive, Blood himself had refused to render any account of his doings since the Arabella had separated from her sister ships. Wolverstone congratulated himself upon the discretion he had used with Dyke. "The captain was ever a modest man," he explained to Hagthorpe and those others who came crowding around him. "It's not his way to be sounding his own praises. Why, it was like this. We fell in with old Don Miguel, and when we'd scuttled him, we took aboard a London fop, sent out by the Secretary of State to offer the captain the king's commission, if so be him'd quit piracy and be a good behavior. The captain cursed him up and down for answer, and then we fell in with Jamaica Fleet, and that grey old devil Bishop in command, and there was a sure end to Captain Blood, and to every mother's son of us all. So I goes to him, and accept his proxy commission, say I. Turn king's man and save your neck and ours. He took me at my word, and the London fop gave him the king's commission on the spot, and Bishop all but choked hisself with rage when he was told of it. But happened it had, and he was forced to swallow it. We were king's men all, and so into Port Royal we sailed along with Bishop. But Bishop didn't trust us. He knew too much. But for his lordship, the fellow from London, he'd a hanged the captain. King's commission and all. Blood would have slipped out of Port Royal again that same night. But that hound Bishop had passed the word, and the fort kept a sharp lookout. In the end, though, it took a fortnight. Blood bubbled him. He sent me and most of the men off in a frigate that I bought for the voyage. His game, as he'd secretly told me, was to follow and give chase. Whether that's the game he played or not, I can't tell you, but here he is afore me, as I'd expected he would be. There was a great historian lost in Wolverstone. He had the right imagination for that knows just how far it is safe to stray from the truth, and just how far to color it, so as to change its shape for his own purposes. Having delivered himself of his decoction of fact and falsehood, and thereby added one more to the exploits of Peter Blood, he inquired where the captain might be found. Being informed that he kept his ship, Wolverstone stepped into a boat and went aboard to report himself, as he put it. In the great cabin of the Arabella he found Peter Blood, alone, and very far gone in drink, a condition in which no man ever before remembered to have seen him. As Wolverstone came in, the captain raised bloodshot eyes to consider him. A moment they sharpened in their gaze as he brought his visitor into focus. Then he laughed, a loose, idiot laugh, and yet somehow was half a sneer. "Ah, the old wolf," said he. "Got here at last, eh? And what you gonna do with me, eh?" He hiccuped resoundingly and sagged back loosely in his chair. Old Wolverstone stared at him in somber silence. He had looked with untroubled eye upon many a hell of bedevilment in his time, but the sight of Captain Blood in this condition filled him with grief. To express it, he loosed an oath. It was his only expression for emotion of all kinds. Then he rolled forward and dropped into a chair at the table, facing the captain. "My God, Peter, what's this?" Rum," said Peter. "Rum from Jamaica." He pushed the bottle and glass towards Wolverstone. Wolverstone disregarded them. "I'm asking you what ails you," he bawled. "Rum," said Captain Blood again, and smiled. "Just rum. I answer all your questions. Why don't you answer mine? What you gonna do with me?" "I've done it," said Wolverstone. "Thank God you had the sense to hold your tongue till I came. Are you sober enough to understand me?" "Drunk or sober, always understand you." "Then listen." And out came the tale that Wolverstone told. The captain steadied himself to grasp it. "It'll do as well as truth," said he when Wolverstone had finished. "And, no matter. Much obliged to you, old wolf, faithful old wolf. But, was it worth the trouble? I'm nor a pirate now, never a pirate again. It's finished." He banged the table, his eyes suddenly fierce. "I'll come to talk to you again when there's less rum in your wits," said Wolverstone, rising. "Meanwhile, you'll please to remember the tale I've told, and say nothing that'll make me out a liar. They all believes me, even the men as sailed with me from Port Royal. I've made 'em. If they thought as how you'd taken the king's commission in earnest, and for the purpose of doing as Morgan did, ye guess what would follow." "Hell will follow," said Captain Blood. "And that's all I'm fit for." You're maudlin," Wolverstone growled. "We'll talk again tomorrow." They did. but to little purpose, either that day or on any day thereafter, while the rains, which set in that night, endured. Soon the shrewd Wolverstone discovered that rum was not what ailed Blood. Rum was in itself an effect, and not by any means the cause of the captain's listless apathy. There was a canker eating at his heart, and the old wolf knew enough to make a shrewd guess of its nature. He cursed all things that daggled petticoats, and, knowing his world, waited for the sickness to pass. But it did not pass. When Blood was not dicing or drinking in the taverns of Tortuga, keeping company that in his saner days he had loathed, he was shut up in his cabin aboard the Arabella, alone and uncommunicative. His friends at Government House, bewildered at this change in him, sought to reclaim him. Mademoiselle de Orgeron, particularly distressed, sent him almost daily invitations, to few of which he responded. Later, as the rainy season approached its end, he was sought by his captains with proposals of remunerative raids on Spanish settlements. But to all, he manifested an indifference which, as the weeks passed and the weather became settled, begot first impatience and then exasperation. Christian, who commanded the Clotho, came storming to him one day, upbraiding him for his inaction and demanding that he should take order about what was to do. "Go to the devil," Blood said when he heard him out. Christian departed, fuming, and on the morrow the Clotho weighed anchor and sailed away, setting an example of desertion from which the loyalty of Blood's other captains would soon be unable to restrain their men. Sometimes Blood asked himself why he had come back to Tortuga at all. Held fast in bondage by the thought of Arabella and her scorn of him for a thief and a pirate, he had sworn that he had done with buccaneering. Why, then, was he here? That question he would answer with another. Where else was he to go? Neither backward nor forward could he move, it seemed. He was degenerating, visibly, under the eyes of all. He had entirely lost the almost foppish concern for his appearance, and was grown careless and slovenly in his dress. He allowed a black beard to grow on his cheeks that had ever been so carefully shaven, and the long, thick black hair, once so sedulously curled, hung now in lank, untidy mane about a face that was changing from its vigorous swarthiness to an unhealthy sallow, whilst the blue eyes, that had been so vivid and compelling, were now dull and lackluster. Wolverstone, the only one who had held the clue to this degeneration, ventured once, and once only, to beard him frankly about it. "Lord Peter, is there never to be no end to this?" the giant had growled. "Will you spend your days moping and swilling 'cause a white-faced ninny in Port Royal have none of ye? Blood and ounds, if you want your wench, why the plague don't you just go and fetch her?" The blue eyes glared at him from under the jet-black eyebrows, and something of their old fire began to kindle in them. But Wolverstone went on, heedlessly. "I'll be nice with a wench as long as niceness be the key to her favour, but sink me now if I'd rot myself in rum on account of anything that wears a petticoat. That's not the old wolf's way. If there's no other expedition I'll tempt you, why not Port Royal? What a plague do it matter if it's an English settlement? It's commanded by Colonel Bishop, and there's no lack of rascals in your company to follow you to hell if it meant getting Colonel Bishop by the throat. It could be done, I tell you." We've but to spy the chance when the Jamaica fleet is away. There's enough plunder in that town to tempt the lads, and there's the wench for you. Shall I sound them on it?" Blood was on his feet, his eyes blazing, his livid face distorted. "You leave my cabin this minute, so you will, or by heaven, it's your corpse'll be carried out of it. You mangy hound, do you dare come to me with such proposals?" He fell to cursing his faithful officer with a virulence the like of which he had never been known to use, and Wolverstone, in terror before that fury, went out without another word. The subject was not raised again, and Captain Blood was left to his idle abstraction. But at last, as his buccaneers were growing desperate, something happened. Brought about by the captain's friend, Monsieur de Ogeron. One sunny morning, the governor of Tortuga came aboard the Arabella, accompanied by a chubby little gentleman, amiable of countenance, amiable and self-sufficient of manner. "My captain," Monsieur de Ogeron delivered himself, "I bring you Monsieur de Cussy, the governor of French Hispaniola, who desires a word with you." Out of consideration for his friend, Captain Blood pulled the pipe from his mouth, shook some of the rum out of his wits, and rose and made a leg to Monsieur de Cussy. "Servateur," he said. Monsieur de Cussy returned the bow and accepted a seat on the locker under the stern windows. "You have a good force here under your command, my captain," said he. "Some 800 men. And I understand they grow restive in idleness." "They may go to the devil when they please." Monsieur de Cussy took snuff delicately. "I have something better than that to propose," said he. "Propose it then," said Blood, without interest. Monsieur de Cussy looked at Monsieur de Ogeron, who raised his eyebrows a little. He did not find Captain Blood encouraging, but Monsieur de Ogeron nodded vigorously with pursed lips, and the governor of Hispaniola propounded his business. "News has reached us from France that there is war with Spain." "That is news, is it?" growled Blood. "I am speaking officially, my captain. I am not alluding to unofficial skirmishes and unofficial predatory measures, which we have condoned out here. There is war, formally war, between France and Spain in Europe. It is the intention of France that this war shall be carried into the New World. A fleet is coming out from Brest under the command of Monsieur le Baron de Rivarol for that purpose. I have letters from him desiring me to equip a supplementary squadron and raise a body of not less than 1,000 men to reinforce him on his arrival. What I have come to propose to you, my captain, at the suggestion of our good friend Monsieur de Ogeron, is, in brief, that you enroll your ships and your force under Monsieur de Rivarol's flag." Blood looked at him with a faint kindling of interest. "You are offering to take us into the French service?" he asked. "On what terms, monsieur?" "With the rank of Captain de Vasseur for yourself and suitable ranks for officers serving under you. You will enjoy the pay of that rank, and you will be entitled, together with your men, to 1/10 share in all prizes taken." "My men will hardly account it generous. They will tell you that they can sail out of here tomorrow, disembowel a Spanish settlement, and keep the whole of the plunder." "Ah, yes, but with the risks attaching to acts of piracy. With us, your position will be regular and official, and considering the powerful fleet by which Monsieur de Rivarol is backed, The enterprises to be undertaken will be on a much vaster scale than anything you could attempt on your own account. So that the 1/10 in this case may be equal or equal to more than the whole of the other. Captain Blood considered. This, after all, was not piracy that was being proposed. It was honorable employment in the service of the King of France. I will consult my officers, he said, and he sent for them. They came, and the matter was laid before them by Monsieur de Cousy himself. Hagthorpe announced at once that the proposal was opportune. The men were grumbling at their protracted inaction, and would no doubt be ready to accept the service which Monsieur de Cousy offered on behalf of France. Hagthorpe looked at Blood as he spoke. Blood nodded, gloomy agreement. Emboldened by this, they went on to discuss the terms. Iberville, the young French filibuster, had the honor to point out to Monsieur de Cousy that the share offered was too small. For 1/5 of the prizes, the officers would answer for their men, not for less. Monsieur de Cousy was distressed. He had his instructions. It was taking a deal upon himself to exceed them. The buccaneers were firm. Unless Monsieur de Cousy could make it 1/5, there was no more to be said. Monsieur de Cousy finally consented to exceed his instructions. The articles were drawn up and signed that very day. The buccaneers were to be at Petite Cove by the end of January, when Monsieur de Rivarol had announced that he might be expected. After the following days of activity in Tortuga, refitting the ships, bucketing meat laid in stores, in these matters, which once would have engaged all Captain Blood's attention, he now took no part. He continued listless and aloof. If he had given his consent to the undertaking, or rather allowed himself to be swept into it by the wishes of his officers, it was only because the service offered was of a regular and honorable kind, nowise connected with piracy, with which he swore in his heart that he had done forever. But his consent remained passive. The service awoke no zeal in him. He was perfectly indifferent, as he told Hagthorpe, who ventured once to offer a remonstrance, whether they went to Petite Cove or to Hades, and whether they entered the service of King Louis XIV or of Satan. And there we are, my friends. Chapter 25. In the books, as they say. I don't know who says that. I say that. Thank you very much for joining me today. Peter Blood is upset, having a bad day, or I guess a bad rainy season. Will anything change when he meets Monsieur de Rivarol and fight under the service of King Louis XIV? Only one way to find out, and that is to join us on Monday at 4 p.m. as we will continue and read chapter 26 of Captain Blood. Thank you for joining me. So glad you could be here. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll see you on Monday. Bye, everyone.